So, good evening. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for coming. And last time I was here, there was a huge snowstorm, and I thought, my luck will hit it again. But it seems like a lovely night, and we're here to discuss step and blended families. First, introduce us. I'm Karen Wilding. This is Jenny Key and Kate Ellard. We are all LCSWs, which is Licensed Clinical Social Workers, and we are part of Boulder Psychological Services. I think that 50% of people these days, grown-ups, live with a step relative at some point. It's a shocking figure, but it seems to, in the ways families move these days, that seems to be part of the new normal. So don't feel too alone. So as Jenny said, parenting looks hard, and especially when it gets this level of complication, sometimes it feels very hard. I think step parenting is often even harder. Because there's a back and forth with closeness and distance that you have to work with constantly. It's not value either good or bad, it's just that it changes and it's evolving. So I have some tips. That's my thing here. Which the very first one is that to understand and not forget that there's a difference between a step family and a first family. And that in order to be part of a step family, it automatically means that there's some loss there. And sometimes it's a profound loss, like the death of a parent, or a significant loss, like you don't see that other parent because they're states away, or they stop being in contact with you for some reason. So that loss is a real factor. And sometimes kids and us as parents get the idea that we're going to recreate that first family with its sort of pristine quality. And actually, that's not possible. We have to look at it as a new opportunity with a lot more, what I like to call richness built in. There's just more possibilities, there are more people, there's more connections, and it's just not that little unit that we visualized the first time. So I guess that tip is to think about redefining family. Whatever is not to expect an instant relationship or an instant success. This is an ongoing life process. It takes time. More important is respect. That you, as parents, respect each other, treat each other with respect. The kids see that, and that they treat you with respect. And the other people in their extended family, like their bio dads, stepmoms, whatever. So respect is much more important than instant perfectness. So you build trust by being basically positive. You're not being divisive. You're not saying negative things about anybody in this system, about siblings to each other, or, you look for that thing where you can pull that kid in. The third one, which is a rule you probably all heard, which is that you discipline by biology, which when I first became part of a new family, I found it very helpful that for a year, somebody told me this and I went, boy, that makes sense. For the first year, any big decisions would be made by the biological parent in the system. So it was like, can somebody do this? And it didn't sound like it would be like, ask your mom. And if you're gonna say yes, then you can say, gee, ask Mark. So he got to be good, the person who could say yes, and I would be there to hold the line. And we really did that for a year, and it really worked. It didn't get confused. He didn't have to be a heavy when he didn't have the strength of relationship to do that. So that was a hint that really helped me. The next one is to keep a united front in relation to the kids. So even if you actually disagree and you really are going, you're going, I don't think you should say that, or I don't think you should do that, hold it and wait, and then go for a walk or wait and have a conversation about it. But support the situation, the two of you. It's very important that they see you as a couple that is functioning well. In relation to the kids, it's great if you can spend time with each kid alone. And when you've got 4 kids, 5, it gets hard. It gets really hard to do that. But if you can manage it, it's a nice thing to do. The last point that I really want to make, I have a bunch of other ones, but I think I'll move on and we can have a conversation about it. But the last point I really want to make is to keep your personal well-being, or your marriage, your relationship as the central focus of this new family. If you are strong and healthy and happy, your children will see that, they will feel it, and they will be able to let go of their fear and worry, and that no, they don't have to take care of you and that you are well. So that requires, actually, out of everything I've said, the most work. Because kids are 100% demanding, mom, 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 mom. And in between you're like doing whatever and mom, mom. It's pretty hard to remember to take care of yourself and to take care of your relationship. So some people do it by creating a night for themselves. Early on when I had younger children, I went, okay, nobody gets to ask me questions after 9 o'clock at night. I don't do homework, I don't answer questions, I don't talk to you. You can only come and read with me next to me quietly, that's it. And they all went, oh.
Okay. So before I start, I feel like I have a lot of boring information, but it's nice we have a nice blend of the younger kiddos as well as some teens. And so my role is I want to help, at least for this portion, shed some light on reminding you, you guys are the experts. I know that you live with your kids and you're obviously really good parents and that's why you're here, but sometimes it's helpful to have a balance of what is my child going through developmentally, what's happening with their brain, and what makes it a little bit more tricky in this whole blended family situation. So I'm going to go into some of that and maybe some thoughts that your younger child and your teen might be having about this process so that you can hopefully see it from their side and it can bring a little bit more compassion or understanding when things get really trying, because they will. I mean, that's inevitable in just parenting, let alone blended parenting. The reason that I wanted to have you guys do that is just because when you look at things through the lens of a child and what their brain is going through, or a teenager that's going through their whole individuation, I have to be different from my parents, I have to prove that I can survive away from my parents, the world just looks differently. It doesn't mean it's worse or harder or better or easier, it just means it looks different. And I think kids are born now, I've been doing a lot of elementary school talks lately, and one thing that I really realize now more than ever is that kids are born like these little adults. They seem like they have these really funny things that they say that I never thought to say that stuff when I was younger, my friends didn't. And so as parents, it becomes tricky for us to not think of them as an equal, to put them on the same level as, well, we're all equals in this family, which is a nice theory, but you're still the parents, and as Karen talked about, it's kind of on you to create that first relationship and hold the vision for your family from here and then honor where the kids are. So some things about child development that I'd like to remind you of with younger kids, and maybe some things that they need psychologically. They're going through between the ages of, I'm going to focus mostly on like 5 to 11, they're going through the what am I good at? They realize that they actually care what their friends think and teachers and parents, and they need a lot of approval and a lot of reassurance. And the biggest question is like, what am I going to be good at? Oh, that guy over there is really good at kickball. Am I good at kickball? And so what the important thing for us to remember in parents, and especially coming in, it's a good tip for step parents to really watch what your strength is of your stepchild and your bio child, and notice that and acknowledge them for that, and that might build the bond quicker because it's something that they're needing at that age. And they need to trust their own abilities, and when their whole world, yes?
At that age, between the age of 5 and 11, when they're looking at that, what am I good at, and they need that acknowledgement, is there a certain way that's best for that age group to be acknowledged? Is there a better way to acknowledge them for that age group?
Good question.
That is a good question. Yeah, and I think Kate's going to go into that some, but what I would say is each child is different because we have some really shy children, right? And we have some really outgoing, like they're kind of the class clown, or they're the star of the soccer team already at age 6, they're a little prodigy. So I think it really depends on what your child's personality is, but I would say giving them the opportunity to try new things, which is what blended families are really nice for because we can mix things up, but giving them opportunities to be good at something, I think feels really important for them, as well as if they are doing well in school or they have a struggle in this area academically but a strength in this area, then having them articulate, well, how do you think you did, and then validating for them. Does that feel clear? Answer your question.
Yeah, like you said, if I may add,
Sure.
there's something called the growth mindset, and I recommend we we all look at it a little. So if you ever Google growth mindset for parenting, I highly recommend it. And that theory talks about the great way to compliment your children is not just to do the "you're great, you're awesome, you're the best speller ever," like to try to get away from those and say, "Wow, I saw how you worked so hard on those spelling words."
Yeah.
Compliment their
The
action they
that
took
led to the success.
to success. And if they are struggling, let's say they are a poor speller at this point, they're struggling, you can still compliment the work they put into it.
Yeah.
That kind of builds a growth mindset for them rather than, oh, I'm a great speller and the best speller. If I ever fail at spelling, I suck.
Yes, that,
You know, they're not
yeah,
gonna.
that need to perform. Yep,
So
that was
really
a
good
great
question about
observation.
how
Perfect.
best to.
And another, a book recommendation I have for you is called The Whole Brain Child. And Dan Siegel, he gives a lot of, and he has a co-author, and I feel
Whole
really.
brain.
Child.
Nancy.
Yes, and he gives a lot of really good scenarios about exactly what you're asking, how to talk to your children, how to compliment. A lot of cool scenarios about conflict as well. Okay, so for cognitive development, that was for their psychological development. Cognitive development in the way that they think. Kids at this age are just starting to use logic. Things are starting to make sense to them. So consequences, I didn't put the behavioral development in here, but you talked about boundaries, Annie, is it? So you talked about boundaries, and I think there are two sort of major pushes now for how do we look at child development. One is very old school behavior. If you're rewarded, that behavior gets better. If you're punished, you will diminish that behavior. But what researchers have found is that you really just focus on rewards and consequences. And this is important to remember too, because I think kids kick up their behavior sometimes in a blended family. And so we have this struggle about who consequences, like Karen talked about, and when do we consequence and how much. So if you think of your child, your relationship with your child and in your family as there's got to be that behavior piece, but what the research shows is if it's just behavior-based, then it doesn't last very long. That even if you're rewarding when you're supposed to and consequencing, so don't get so nervous about when am I supposed to consequence and when am I supposed to reward, because really what it comes down to is this other piece that researchers have figured out is just as important, and that's the relationship and the attachment piece. So, which blends into the social development, which is all about kids need a secure attachment. So in this chaos, when you're blending a new family, another parent maybe isn't as available, lives further away, things like that, you're trying to create a new family unit that they can attach to. And even though it's not the first family, it's a consistent and regular family that's going to keep being available and keep offering, okay, even if you tried really hard and you did fail your spelling test, we still love you and we're going to help you get through this. That's the relationship piece versus you didn't do your spelling homework and now you got a bad grade, so you're going to get consequenced. Both pieces are equally as important, because if you have too much of that, let's just love and everybody hug and kind of mentality that I see parents doing a lot, then there aren't enough boundaries to keep kids safe, and they don't enough goals, right, to keep them thriving, right? Exactly. So the cognitive part, the part that feels really important, I think, for parents to understand is that, yes, kids are starting to understand they have logic and things, their behavior relates to a certain thing that happens, but they don't necessarily understand that they know that you have a different perspective, so maybe my stepbrother feels differently than I do about my stepfamily, but they don't have a really good sense of how to try on that feeling yet. So it's hard. I see a lot of the parents trying so hard to explain, well, this is how he feels, and this is how I feel. And between 5 and 11, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but it's kind of a trap because they have trouble really understanding.
They have trouble relating.
Yes, relating. Yes, thank you. Exactly. So those are some things to keep in mind, and I have some bullets here that you guys can kind of read through. I think it's pretty similar for kids and teens about sometimes with step parents, they feel like coming into the family, I'm unsure of what the new parent will want of me. I'm afraid of betraying my bio parents. That often, even if you guys do a really good job of saying, this isn't about replacing your mom, or this isn't about replacing, kids still feel this sense of loyalty to their first family and take on kind of an adult responsibility. So I can answer questions later about how to navigate that. Sometimes about their step sibling, they're excited to have a new friend, but they're also a little guarded, and younger children want approval, older teens want approval, but they also want to seem like they're, independent, and my way is the cool way. And divorce and remarriage tends to be a pretty popular family combination, and so with that comes some confusion. The thing that feels important to highlight about these is that a lot of kids and teens feel it takes them a lot longer to get through it. I've had so many of my kids tell me, I'll say kids, but I mean kids and teens, tell me that their parents seem to be over it and moved on and fine, and they expect them to be moved on, and they're not moved on. And this could be a year or two into it. This could be several years into it. And I know one girl always tells me that her stepdad just thinks, I shouldn't have feelings anymore about him being my stepdad and me not having a relationship with my bio dad, but it's a really big thing for her that she's still grieving all of that years later. And that comes in, it impacts their relationship. And you guys talked about a single parent to married, right? Now your new relationship.
Yeah, divorced and single parents.
Right, divorced and single parent. Sometimes kids, even as young as 5, tend to feel pretty protective of like, well, this has been my mom, this is me and my mom, and now, here comes I'm sure he probably likes you, and he thinks you're a new friend, but at the same time, something deep down innate in him is telling him to guard and protect his mom. So that feels important to highlight. The other thing is that sometimes kids are in a survival or fight or flight state. Their brains are in this like, okay, all these changes are happening, and their brains are sort of telling them that this might not last because they've already been through their parents breaking up and you guys forming a new relationship. So their brain is having trouble trusting. Is this really going to stick? So that keeps them in this semi-like survival state. And so Kate, can talk about what you do with that. But it makes it a little trickier because you're thinking, we're safe, we're in a nice, safe household, things are going well. Why is there still all this acting out or confusion or anger or resentment? So teens, I want to touch on briefly so then I can pass it over to Kate, but again, please feel free to read this over. I think the biggest thing that I want to say is teens, especially my older teens that are seniors in high school, freshmen in college, they look and act and talk so much like adults, and I've had so many step parents that I've had to work with that have said, I just don't get why she doesn't understand this. But teens' brains are changing until they're well into their 20s, which is why my 20-something client today is still in so much pain. And the thing she was texting her mom that she was upset about, I'm thinking, wow, she's in pain as if one of my 10-year-olds was. It's really hard, I think, and your brain is still changing up until your 20s. So keep in mind that they aren't yet adults, and so they don't have the cognitive control that we have. Teens are more impulsive, and it's really their job to butt up against somebody or to revolt. Yes, push the boundaries, because they're trying to prove that they can survive out on their own. This is their biological drive right now, even though our society isn't kind of built that way anymore. So, but it's their job to challenge rules and take risks and to be, to be a little bit more flighty and not quite as easy to relate to. And so that makes it that much more tricky for the step-parent. So if you realize all of that going in, it might make it seem less personal. It might make it seem like, okay, this is what they're supposed to be doing, and it's not about I'm the world's worst step-parent or I didn't do a good job letting them know I love them. One thing I would guard against too is, like Karen says, really be and hear. A lot of parents that I work with want so much to say, but I've done this and we've done that, and I'm not saying any of you are doing that, but keep in mind that that's a trap that a lot of bio parents and step parents, even my own dad, and I'm in my 30s and I'm a therapist, my own dad is like, see how much your new stepmother is doing for you? And I'm like, and I'm an adult, and I know how to handle this, and I still feel like a 5-year-old with my dad saying, you should really like your new stepmother, and so if I feel that way, that's how, and I think a lot of parents are tempted because you are hurt, and it does feel really hurtful when someone is disrespectful, or your kids that you love so much and you know that they're grieving their mom, and you feel like you've done a lot to try to protect them and help them, they throw some things at you. So just be careful, especially in the teen years, of saying how much you've done for them and how much, trying to kind of get them again to see your point of view, especially with the younger kids, because they won't necessarily get it, and the older kids because they don't want to get it. They're not mature enough to get it yet.
I have a question. So in my particular circumstance, I was the one that chose divorce and left. And so my ex-husband is very bitter and has maintained his stance that he's going to be bitter forever and ever and ever and ever.
Got it.
And so while Sean and I make our house very open, where we can talk about your dad, and they're okay having that conversation with Sean and I, but they're not allowed to go to their dad's house and say anything about Sean, because they know Dad hates Sean.
Right.
Dad won't let them, or there's all this negativity around it, or
I get it.
my son has a football game, and Sean's gonna come. Well, is that a good idea, Mom? He's instantly nervous
Right,
because
they're afraid.
he's gonna
Protecting,
feel backlash from his dad.
Mhm.
If and I said, well, do you want him to come? Well, yeah. I'm like, okay, then I'll talk to your dad about it, and I try to kind of break it in, or what I don't know if this is the right thing to say. This is my question: is when they make the comments like that of, well, Dad's going to say this or Dad's going to do that, my comment back to them is, well, your dad has his own feelings, and I don't think it's very fair for him to push that on you, but he's having those feelings. He's angry, or he's whatever, and you don't have to share it. You can have your own feelings. That's my response, and I don't know if that's the best way to handle it, but I don't really know what else to say.
We're all nodding. If you had any doubts, we're all going, yeah.
This is the example, though, of why we don't ever talk bad about the other parent in front of the kids. I mean, your husband, your ex-husband is
Well, he
unfortunately
bashes me. I
there.
never say anything bad about him, because my son was with another guy, man.
Right.
Yeah, he has a blended family.
Right. I'm just saying, 'cause
Yeah.
that nervousness, you're right, it's not fair for him to put that on your kid. That nervousness is so real in a lot of blended family kids.
That's that survival stuff.
And that can really create some long-term issues.
So, Kate, we'll let you do it. I just want to say one thing about that these days, just as we started out saying that families just don't look like the 50s, it's really a different world. Kids get it. Kids are pretty resilient. at least half of their class have two households that they're going back and forth between. They have extended family situations that they understand. They are very good at going, oh, Dad's house, we're not gonna say anything about Sean. We know that. They just internalize it and they get it. Now, it causes stress, but it's less stressful than it would have been 20 years ago. You know,
Wow.
they have plenty of friends and compatriots and the media and et cetera that say, that's life. So it creates more resilience if they do okay with it. So, sorry, Kate.
So it's okay for me to just say,
Absolutely.
your dad has his feelings?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. It's a
And
good line.
we can't change people in our lives. I mean, we're not gonna change them. He has his stuff. He has his feelings, his thoughts. I'm
And you
sorry,
can
it's,
say, I hope
you
he
know, I think
doesn't-
empathy is good at
It's
that
over.
point. I'm sorry that it stresses you out.
Yeah.
I get it. Build in that empathy, lock in that empathy that, you're sorry it's this way. It's not that you're taking responsibility for it, but build in some empathy so he knows it's okay to keep talking to you about it. Make sure it doesn't stress you out in front of him.
Right, because if he senses that every time you hear it, you get stressed, then it becomes, so you just strong and steady, just like you are right now,
Mhm.
just, I'm really sorry you have to go through that, sweetie. Yeah, your dad has his own feelings and everybody handles things different, and we'll do our best, because you guys then are the really steady, secure attachment, and that's what builds that resilience that Karen's talking about. So none of this, I'm giving you ideas, but I just realized when you were talking, you know, everyone.
Number one is be patient, take things slowly. We want our kids to get along so much that we do this thing that I call manipulative enthusiasm. Isn't Sean great? See what he does for you? Isn't this great? You have 2 more siblings. You know, and it's so well-intentioned, someone had already mentioned, so well-intentioned, and it's because we're excited. We're excited to build our family. You know, and often we're excited about our new relationship, you know, that honeymoon period. We're excited we've moved on from our last relationship, you know, or the loss of our spouses. But taking it slowly with the kids, not expecting them to have an instant bond, it's pretty huge. Avoid pretending like you're one big happy family. They smell that from a mile away. Really, especially the teenagers. You know, you have like a preteen, 13, right? They really smell that. With the younger kids, it does happen. You know, the bonding can happen a little faster, but you can't push it. You have to let them make their own relationship with the step parent. You can't like make it happen. You want to let the kids set the pace as much as possible. Let them say what they want to do with the step parent. Is there anything you want to do? What do you like about Sheridan? What would you like to do with them? Not, hey, I made a plan for you and Sheridan to do this. Does that make sense? Even when they're young, you want to get their input.
If I let that happen, they're just gonna beat each other all the time.
I was gonna say, sometimes they can be the new play friend, who like, oh, we get to wrestle and play
Hulking
video
Avengers
games.
and-
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but that's great. And then Sheridan gets to say, all right, I've had enough fun for today. I'm going to do like, but it's important for them to build that relationship and that limit setting too, because then they're going to see you as an adult who can set a healthy limit. Play with me first, but set that limit. You know, but not the disciplining limit, right? But just, okay, I've got to do something else now. So it's important to build a relationship that way.
But would you recommend, just thinking about my teenagers in the room, would you recommend that they just, because teens tend to say no to everything, right? No, no, no. You want to spend time together, you want to go hiking? No. So give them choices, but sometimes should there be a family routine? What would you recommend?
The teenagers are very different. Yes, you can ask them if there's anything they want to do, but That's more than 13 and under kids. The teenagers are already, as you said, doing the independence thing. So they don't actually need to do a lot with their new stepfather or stepmother. But the routines of having dinner together and making that an expectation or requirement. And if you haven't read the first beginning of this, and you've heard other people say, bio parent sets the expectation. We set the rules and expectation. Often we talk about it behind closed doors with our partner, yes. But we say it out loud. We say, this is what I expect from you. And we heard about, hey, maybe a year of, I think that's a good, but it's flexible for families, but you gotta set the expectations.
Also, you sort of set them slightly lower than you really kind of secretly want. You know, it's like, okay, we are gonna have a family dinner, and this is especially with teenagers, once a week, where everybody is gonna be home, and you're all gonna be home at the same time, and we're gonna do it. Just because I think it's a great idea. Now, it may not work, they're at practice, they're off, they're doing something, but you hold the dinner, and eventually they'll want to not be left out. Because
Absolutely.
something's actually happening there.
Yes.
So one of the things, when I had teenagers in my new family, I would pick a few things that I was absolutely adamant about.
Mhm.
We are gonna do this, or I just pick them. And they wouldn't be a lot of them, and they wouldn't be daily, and it would be big events or holidays or something. That was important to me. I really looked very carefully at my own heart about it. What did I really want? Not, I want this all to be a story, but I really want you guys all here on this night, and it's important to me. And they would show up, you know? At that age, my daughter wouldn't wear a skirt. I was like, once a year, we're going out to something, you have to wear a skirt. It was a big deal. Holidays, she's still,
I have
I
one
bought
like
a
that.
skirt.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Oh.
She's like, not like 5'8", and stately, and she goes,
I like what you're saying about set it up and say what's important to you. And I remember when I was a teen and my parents got divorced, that was one thing my mom was kind of good at. My dad set it up, but then it was like he wanted us to do all of it, my brother and I. Like, okay, Christmas is really important to me, and we've got to stay together as a family, and your new stepmom and all of this. And then he got there and he was like, well, why didn't you guys decorate the house or cook anything? And we were still kids. So I think reasonable expectations is what I want to translate between Karen and Kate, is set it up, say what's important to you, but then make it happen and be the regular, consistent.
You have to
and
create the space as a
create the
parent.
space and let them show up. And this goes for all ages.
Yeah,
Your
create
face,
the
Annie, is
ritual.
like, well, what are you guys
it's like,
talking
oh
about?
my God, I got 4 or 5 kids here.
All right. Are your teenagers kind of refusing to follow any family expectations, or are they at that
My
point?
15-year-old is refusing to follow a few, but we have meals together every night. She doesn't
Good.
do much.
Wow.
And the
Keep
younger ones
that.
don't, so.
Keep that going.
Whoa.
we're
So
trying
she's
to
a homebody.
balance
She wants to
everything.
be home every night, basically. After school, she loves school. She has a great time, but she needs like recharge time after
Mhm.
school.
That's in your favor,
That is.
That is, yeah.
because you're there.
But those family routines, and I don't know for you guys that making some family meeting times. It sounds so dorky, but even if it's once a month, and you bill it as this is where you get to say what you want and what you're pissed off at. You know, use their language, and have a notebook. Write it down. I mean, it sounds so dorky, but.
For a while, when we first moved in together last year, one of the things that we did was we used to do the best and the worst.
Sure.
Do you remember that? We'd eat dinner, it was just like the easiest question.
Right.
And we didn't have to come up with a new question every day, but it always created a new conversation every day,
Yes.
because it was the best and the worst of the day. And we would just go around the table.
That's a great
That
one for
sucked.
teenagers
Sorry.
too.
You know, whatever. But we also always had to come up with the best. Even if it was a mediocre best, we've always tried to balance it. Express the negative, but also find the positive.
And it is really good to start it when they're younger, because it's hard, sometimes if you introduce that to teenagers, they're like,
So I love your idea about, trying to set out that year plan of bio does the discipline, step parent, is the yes man, right? That's fantastic. I definitely think we should do that, but it doesn't always apply. If there are times when Sean has the kids, I'm not there,
Oh,
he still has.
I didn't say
Yes.
that, that
Oh,
was the
yes.
other part of that rule. I'm sorry, I didn't complete it. The other part of the rule is if you leave and Sean is in charge, you pass that very consciously and in words to Sean.
Inwards.
In
In
front of
words,
the-
you
in front of
say,
the kids. Okay,
okay, you
Sean."
guys, Sean is in
Yeah.
charge,
Sean is the parent in charge.
or the person in charge.
Person in charge.
And you have to listen to him, I'll be back at 10, 8, whatever. And so you pass it to him for a discrete amount of time, and he gets it and goes, okay, I'm on, guys, I'm on. Dishes one, let's just go there. They didn't do their dishes, mom walks in, you say, gosh, I asked them and nobody seems to have cleaned up their dishes, and then shut up.
Yes.
And then mom goes, okay, so it looks like it's dish cleaning time. I'll help. You pick up one dish and let them pick up all the rest and do it. So that they understand that the dishes isn't optional. They can have it out over here for a while. But in fact, our expectation is that you help with the dishes and you will do it. And you just stand there till it gets done. Instead of, I'll ground you later. That's a really tricky consequence that grounds the parents,
Right.
causes all kinds of, I hate grounding. Because I always felt
It's
much more
precious.
grounded than they did.
That's what
Yeah.
grounds you
Sucks.
guys, that's what she's
That's-
saying.
It
yeah.
sucks, grounding yourself. You're
And-
grounding yourself.
Yeah.
Just stand there till they do the expected chore.
Something we've been doing, because Jenny actually had her two on allowance. And I didn't. I started the younger one on allowance. And now there's a financial penalty.
Yes.
Just like a fine, you speed, guess
Just like
what?
your job.
Fail police,
That's right.
pull you over, you gotta come to traffic court.
Absolutely, this is
You know, not that it would happen to me, but the point is, there's a consequence.
And it's
I-
equally shared among the 3 kids.
And the consequences work really well when you have an attachment. You made that good point of consequences and good consequences. It's tricky figuring out the good consequences that are pertinent. But they work best when you already have a connection. You have an attachment to your bio kids. That's why it's so much easier for the disciplinarian to be the bio parent. So both are important.
So a question about consequences. Andy travels quite a bit. So if he sets up a consequence that his daughter knows if this happens, Jenny can do this. This is what the consequence is going to be that she will carry out. Then I'm not really the heavy, I'm just
Right.
carrying out the consequences that have been
That's the idea.
established.
That's
But
the
the
idea.
best way to handle travels,
Sure.
the jobs.
And it's still, how early, you guys are 5
Couple
months
months.
together? You guys are
2.5.
It's still, I wonder about waiting for dad to come home even sometimes.
Well, but he's traveling. So
He's
that's
traveling.
too long.
I would use a
Yes,
love and
yes.
logic approach to that. Have you guys heard
Yeah.
Parenting with Love and Logic?
Yeah.
I've had a lot of parents that have felt like that's a helpful resource, and what I really like about that is, ooh, you say to her, oh, I'm really sorry, that is such a bummer that you failed on that, because I know you and your dad had it set up,
Yeah.
if this didn't work, then this is what was gonna happen, so I wanna see you successful, let's maybe get this, whatever the consequence is, if she loses some allowance, but let's figure out a way for you to get it done.
Before I have that nightly conversation with your dad at 10 tonight. So you've got a gap in there where I talk to your dad every night, and I don't want to have to tell him that. Let's just get it done.
Yeah, it's just.
And that would be my suggestion, because I can hear that you've had it. You're like, they're not listening to me, the mess is enough. You're running a marathon, and right now I think you're parenting in a 5K instead of a marathon. So what I would say is try to make it more like, and this isn't easy. We're not like, oh my gosh, this is just so easy. And I told them our last
time.
Co-presenter last week was like, hug your kids more.
Oh
And I
my
was
God.
joking with Karen how I was like, I kind of wanted to just wring his neck because all the parents were looking at him like, he stole my iPad, I'm supposed to hug him? You know, so I'm not telling you just
He's being
kumbaya,
a
you
jerk.
know, Sean, just hug him and it'll be fine. But I am saying, maybe say, ooh, guys, this is not good. Your mom's gonna be home, not gonna be fun for any of us. Maybe let's get this cleaned up and choose your battles. Are the dishes the most important thing or is getting to bed the most important thing? And maybe you guys decide that as parents, and that's where Karen was talking about coming together.
And let it go, let the mess go. and
Let it go and
we'll
don't
see.
grumble because they'll see that they get you and then they're like, this is
Oh,
how
yeah.
we're gonna get it.
Yeah, and let the angry stuff go.
That's a
No, don't be mad
constant
at
battle,
people.
it's like.
That's what we
Don't-
gotta
don't
take
be
the battle
mad at
out, because let me
people,
tell you
okay?
what, guys, with these younger kids, if you battle and you get in the consequence war and threaten, when they get to be teenagers, they are gonna win. They're
Yeah.
just gonna win. They're
They
out
just
the
walk
door,
on you.
they're F off, out the door, and you can't control them. So
Right.
you don't wanna set that up now when they're younger of like, well, I'm gonna get the better of you. So that's why you've gotta trick them into thinking it's a game and they kind of failed when it was on them.
Mm.
So I feel
No,
like
that's
it's
good.
totally
Well, I
fine.
tried the allowance thing you're talking about, so with the older boy, I said, hey, I have to run out for a little bit, clean up the house. I'll give you $20 if you do this, 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 and this, which is, he should have already. No, it's just.
What
Were
are
they-
they,
were they
it
his
was
jobs?
$20.
$20, I'll come over.
$20.
Yeah, I know, right?
Give me a call.
So I come back, half an hour later, whatever, maybe it wasn't enough time. And just a piece of it was done, you know, it was like half-assed totally.
Give him a
So I gave him
$20.
$5. I left him a note, and his grandpa picked him up, and I left him $5. And I said, you're only getting $5 because you did a quarter of the amount of work that I asked you
But
to
good
do."
job on that quarter of amount.
Right.
Right?
I mean, so I didn't
That's
say
fine.
good job, I was more like
That was
frustrated.
clear expectations,
Mhm.
but once you do it, once you figure out what the structure is, like, okay, I'll give you 20 and increments thereof, he now knows if you don't do it, you have to be okay with that. At the point where you hand him 5, that's what he gets, it's fine. So
No,
you
I-
having leftover emotion and disappointment and being pissed off isn't clean enough.
Mhm.
So it's gotta be okay with you. So a punishment that punishes you is probably not a good idea. But something where you can get clean, like you said this and you did that, I'm out.
Yeah, and it's.
You know, and you just emotionally and you just don't engage at the level, I'm trying to get you not to be fighting at that level that he's
No,
at.
I
You
pick
know.
and choose my battles
Smart move.
with them.
Yeah, I hear it a lot from step parents where they're just frustrated, like, don't they get how difficult this is, not exactly what you're saying, but I heard, there's one dad that I work pretty closely with that he's just like, when is it time for her to understand my perspective and how hard this has been? And
Right,
what
right.
my job is to remind, it's so hard, it is a thankless job sometimes, parenting and step parenting, yeah.
So to take your shoes off, the couch isn't a jungle gym, pick up after yourself, flush the toilet.
That's gotta be exhausting.
It
Gotta-
just goes on.
Like, it's
I agree.
So sometimes you just make a great big list and decorate.
Yeah.
You know, remember that we're laughing, and we're laughing with you because we've all been there. So at some point, make a big list and let them draw all over it, or keep it's light, you
The
know,
levity.
the couch isn't a jungle gym, yeah, right. You know, my 3-year-old grandson just walked in, looked at me the other day and went, no, Yaya. I went, really? Dude, I've got all the food and everything you want. He went, no, Yaya. And so he threw himself on the floor. And I just went, really? And so I just didn't look at him.
Right.
And I stopped talking to him and I went and did something else. And there he was on the floor. And finally I said, do you want one of those crackers? And he got up and moved over and said, sure. And we didn't have a conversation about it, and we didn't get into
You
it.
didn't get into it.
I mean, I don't even know what the issue was, quite honestly. He was 3.
The thing about the list that I really like of what the expectations are sometimes is then you get to just say, go check your list, see if there's anything you gotta do. Instead of saying, flush the toilet, turn the lights off, clear the dish, you know, just go check and it's like, it's their responsibility.